Zephyr was no ordinary wind. He loved to whistle as he danced through the trees, his sweet, joyful tunes making the leaves sway and the flowers bloom. But one fateful morning, Zephyr awoke to find something terrible. His whistle was gone. He blew and blew, but no sound came out. The trees stood still, the flowers didn't dance, and the world felt strangely quiet. How could he be Zephyr, the playful wind, without his music? Determined to find his whistle, he set off on a journey, ready to listen and discover what the world had to offer when he stopped trying to be the loudest breeze. Chapter 1. The Whistleless Morning. Once upon a time, in a sky stitched with starlight and dreams, where clouds told stories and breezes carried secrets, there lived a little wind named Zephyr. Zephyr was no bigger than a handful of breeze, but he was known far and wide across valleys, meadows, mountaintops, and sleepy villages. Not because he was the strongest or the fastest, but because of something else entirely: his whistle. Zephyr's whistle wasn't just a sound, it was a song. When he zipped through tall grasses, they danced to his tune. When he flew past wind chimes, they jingled in time. When he swept through apple trees in the orchard, the leaves rustled in harmony, and even the apples seemed to bounce along. He was the music of the morning and the lullaby of dusk. His whistle was sweet and light, full of mischief and cheer. It could wake drowsy sunflowers and tickle grumpy barn cats. He would soar past mountaintops, leaving giggles in the snow. Children in villages below would laugh and call out, "There goes Zephyr," whenever they heard his tune twist through the clouds. Zephyr loved his whistle. It was the way he spoke to the world. His joy, his jokes, his hello, and his goodbye. Without it, he was just wind. But one morning everything changed. As the first golden light of dawn stretched across the horizon, Zephyr rose from his slumber high in the sky. He stretched, swirled into a yawn, and tried to whistle a bright, cheery note to greet the day. Nothing. He tried again, louder, with a little spin. Still nothing. No chirp, no hum, not even a single airy wheeze. Confused, Zephyr zipped through the trees. The branches didn't sway. The leaves stayed still. The flowers didn't turn their faces to follow him. It was as though the world didn't know he was there. Panic began to stir in his breeze-like belly. He blew past a sleepy barn. No hay fluttered. He whooshed through a curtain in an open window. It didn't lift. He circled a flock of birds, and not one ruffled feather moved. He was silent. Utterly, completely, terribly silent. Zephyr's heart, if winds could have hearts, began to ache. He felt smaller than ever before. How could he be Zephyr without his whistle? The world, once vibrant and alive with sound and motion, now felt unfamiliar, dull, distant, lonely. For the first time, Zephyr didn't feel like playing. He didn't feel like darting between mountaintops or racing dandelion fluff. Instead, he hovered in place, watching the world go by without him. But deep within that quiet ache, something stirred. A whisper of a thought, like the faintest breeze. What if this is the world telling me to listen? Zephyr had never truly listened before. He had always been the one filling the air, never stopping to hear what else might be there. And so, with a gentle swirl, Zephyr began his journey, not to find a tune to call his own, but to discover the music he had missed. a journey not of noise, but of listening. And with that, the silent little wind drifted across the land, heart open, ears wide and spirit searching. Chapter 2: The Meadow's Song. Zephyr drifted low across the golden morning sky, his movements slower than usual. Without his whistle, he didn't feel quite like himself. No playful twirls, no teasing gusts. Just a quiet glide above a world that no longer danced to his song. But below him stretched a meadow so wide and sunlit, it glowed like a blanket of gold. The tall grasses swayed ever so slightly in the breeze, not from him, but from the natural rhythm of morning rising. The dew sparkled on each blade like scattered stars that had fallen in the night. Zephyr paused. He hovered just above the meadow's edge, letting the warmth of the sun rest on his back. He was about to move on when he heard something he might have missed if he'd still had his whistle. Birdsong. At first, it was one voice, a delicate trill from a sparrow perched on a fence post. Then came the round, melodic call of a robin hidden somewhere among the thistle. A blue jay chimed in with sharp, playful notes, and all at once, the air was full of feathered music. It was not a song Zephyr had ever heard in full before. He'd always whistled right over it. He floated downward, weaving between the grass stalks, careful not to disturb the music. He found a breeze path where he could drift low, closer to the earth than he'd ever bothered to go before. There, sitting quietly among the daisies, was a little girl. She had curly dark hair, pulled back with a ribbon the color of peaches, and a soft, peaceful expression. In her lap lay a half-finished daisy chain. As she worked, a butterfly fluttered by, light as a whisper, and landed on the tip of her nose. She giggled. It was not a loud sound, not the kind of laugh that echoed. It was soft and delicate, like the sound of wind brushing across silk, and it made Zephyr pause. He lingered in that meadow, watching the girl, listening to the birds, and letting the stillness fill him. He realized then that there were sounds all around him, tiny beautiful things he'd never taken the time to notice. The hum of bees skipping from bloom to bloom, the rustle of mice beneath the tall grass, the distant creak of a wooden windmill turning with the day. Every bit of it was music, not bold, not grand, but real. Zephyr drifted closer to the girl. Her fingers moved gently through the daisies, and her hum blended with the bird's song, a duet made not for applause but simply for joy. He let himself sway in her rhythm. For the first time in his breezy little life, Zephyr didn't feel the need to make a sound. He only wanted to listen. And as he did, something stirred in his chest. Not his whistle, not yet, but something softer, quieter, and perhaps just as powerful. A sense of wonder. Chapter 3. The Lullaby in the Village. By the time evening tiptoed across the sky, Zephyr had drifted far from the meadow and the golden grass. The sunlight softened into warm orange, and the clouds turned the color of ripe peaches. Without his whistle to announce his arrival, Zephyr slipped quietly into a sleepy little village tucked between two hills. Lanterns flickered to life, glowing like fireflies inside windows. Chimneys puffed gentle streams of smoke into the dusk, and the scent of warm bread and spiced stew filled the air. It was the kind of place where everything slowed down at the end of the day, where even time seemed to pause and take a breath. Zephyr hovered near the rooftops, watching. He had visited villages before, racing down alleys, rattling shutters, flipping laundry off the line with cheeky glee. But now, without his whistle, he felt like a guest rather than a prankster. He didn't rush. He floated softly, weaving between glowing windows, careful not to disturb the peace. Then, from one little cottage near the edge of the square, he heard it, a voice. A woman's voice, humming gently in the twilight. Zephyr turned toward it, drawn by the warmth in her melody. Through the slightly open window, he could see a mother rocking her baby in a wooden chair carved with stars. The baby's eyes were already drooping, his tiny fist curled into his blanket. The lullaby was simple, just a few soft notes repeated again and again. But each note wrapped around Zephyr like a wool blanket, warm and tender. He leaned in, letting the song wash over him. The room glowed from the firelight, and the shadows on the walls danced like soft brushstrokes. Zephyr didn't dare disturb them. He just floated, listening. The melody didn't sparkle like birdsong or twinkle like laughter, but it soothed. It made the whole world feel safe. Something deep inside Zephyr stirred. Not sadness, not happiness, something in between. Comfort. As the final note faded, the baby let out a sigh and fell into sleep. The mother kissed his forehead, tucked the blanket around him, and whispered something Zephyr couldn't hear, but somehow understood. He didn't need to whistle to feel this moment. He carried the tune with him as he drifted upward into the night sky, weaving gently between stars just beginning to appear. The world had changed while he wasn't looking. Or maybe it had always been this way and he had just never noticed. Above the rooftops, another breeze slipped beside him. This one was slower, older, quieter. Zephyr could feel the age in this wind, like ancient mountains wrapped in motion. "Lost something, have you?" the old wind murmured, barely louder than a sigh. Zephyr nodded, his edges dim with weariness. "My whistle is gone." The old wind gave a smile only another wind could see. "Sometimes," he said softly, "losing one thing helps us find another." Before Zephyr could ask what that meant, the elder breeze drifted higher into the stars and vanished. Zephyr remained there for a long while, watching the sky ripple with twilight, the lullaby still echoing gently in his breeze. Chapter 4. The Lake of Echoes. The next morning the sky was silver and soft, like the inside of a seashell. Zephyr drifted lazily above a wide, sparkling lake nestled between hills covered in pine and moss. Mist hovered gently over the surface, swirling in delicate ribbons that danced without need for music. Zephyr had traveled far now, farther than he ever had before. In the past, he would have rushed past this place in a flurry of whistles and laughter, skimming across the water just to see it ripple. But today he moved slowly, letting the cool air rest against him like a second skin. The lake was alive with quiet sound. Frogs croaked their morning chorus in the reeds. Fish leapt from the water with sudden splashes that broke the silence and vanished just as quickly. A kingfisher shrieked as it zipped overhead, its wings slicing the air like paper. Zephyr listened. Even the stillness here had its own rhythm. The creak of a wooden dock shifting with the water, the distant knock of a boat against its moorings, the soft buzz of dragonflies circling in loops. And then laughter. Not loud or wild, but light and playful. Zephyr followed the sound to a group of children playing near the shoreline. Some were skipping stones, others wading into the water, their pants rolled to their knees. The air was filled with giggles, chatter, and the unmistakable squeals of feet meeting cold water. He swirled gently around them, catching bits of conversation. And then the frog jumped into his shoe. "No, really, I saw the fish smile. I bet if we stay quiet, we'll see the water fairies." Their voices bubbled up like spring water, pure, bright, and full of imagination. But one child sat apart, a boy with dark hair and a thoughtful expression. He sat cross-legged on a flat rock with a small wooden flute cradled in his hands. His fingers moved slowly, carefully, like he was learning the shape of each sound. Zephyr stilled. The boy raised the flute and began to play. The melody was not perfect. It wavered in places and skipped now and then, but it was sincere. It told a story without words, of wind and waves, of mountains and longing, of something small trying to find something lost. Zephyr drifted closer, almost afraid to interrupt. The notes wrapped around him. Not loud, not boastful, just honest. Each sound seemed to rise from the boy's heart and fall gently into the water, where the lake carried it onward like a secret. Zephyr listened to every note, and something inside him began to shift. He realized now that whistling wasn't the only way to make music. Sometimes music was found in listening, in patience, in silence, in the courage to let something outside yourself speak. The boy finished his tune and smiled softly to no one in particular. Zephyr smiled too, if winds could smile, and drifted onward, the echo of the flute now a part of him, nestled where his own whistle used to be. It hadn't returned yet, but something was building. Chapter 5: The Hum of the World. Days turned into weeks as Zephyr traveled farther and farther from the places he once knew. Without his whistle, the world had become a quieter place. He found himself floating through valleys filled with rustling trees, quiet brooks with a soft murmur of water over stones, and fields where birds built their nests without a sound of greeting. The more he listened, the more he understood. The world was alive, full of soft sounds, whispers, and hums. Zephyr had spent so much of his life being the loudest voice in the sky that he had never taken the time to hear the music all around him. Now, without his whistle, it was as if the world was singing its secrets, and all Zephyr had to do was listen. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, Zephyr found himself drifting over a peaceful hillside, the air cool and crisp as it whispered through the tall grass. Above, the sky had begun to darken, and the first twinkling stars began to show their faces. Zephyr rested on a cloud, looking out over the world below. He wasn't sure what he was looking for anymore. He had searched high and low for his whistle, but it was still gone. He had hoped it would return, but it hadn't. Suddenly, a quiet hum filled the air, so faint Zephyr almost missed it. It was a low sound, almost imperceptible, like the earth itself was breathing. He tilted his head, drifting a little closer to the source. At the foot of the hill was a patch of snow-covered ground where, buried beneath a blanket of frosty snowflakes, a single flower had bloomed. It was a small blossom, delicate and white, its petals shimmering as the night air kissed them. As Zephyr approached, he realized the humming sound was coming from the flower. It wasn't a melody, not like the bird songs or the lullaby from the village. It was quieter than that. A hum, a vibration, something that existed in the very stillness of the world. Zephyr hovered closer, listening more carefully. The flower was singing, not with notes, but with its very being. It hummed softly as the air swirled around it, its petals vibrating just enough to carry the sound. For the first time, Zephyr understood. Music wasn't just about sound. It was about the way things moved, the way they felt. The flower didn't need to whistle. It simply existed, and in doing so, it created its own song. Zephyr floated around the flower, listening to its hum, letting the sound fill him. And for the first time in what felt like forever, he didn't miss his whistle, because he realized that the world didn't need him to make a noise. The world had its own hum, its own music, if only he would stop and listen. He stayed with the flower until the stars filled the sky and the moon bathed the hill in silver light. And as he did, Zephyr felt something shift inside him, something warm and full. He didn't need to whistle to be part of the world's song. He just needed to listen. Chapter 6. The Return of the Whistle. The world seemed to hum in a new way now. Each day, Zephyr traveled farther, still without his whistle, but no longer feeling quite as lost. He had learned to listen, to the rustling of the trees, the murmurs of the rivers, the hum of the earth itself. And although his whistle had not returned, something inside him had changed. One evening, as the stars twinkled above like scattered diamonds, Zephyr found himself drifting toward a wide meadow. It was a place he had passed many times before, but tonight it felt different. The air was warm and soft, and the moon shone brightly, casting a silvery glow over the world. Zephyr floated down toward the meadow, the grasses swaying gently in the night breeze. In the distance, he saw the flicker of light from a small campfire. He moved closer, curious, and saw a group of travelers gathered around the fire, wrapped in blankets and telling stories. One of the travelers, an older man with a weathered face, was playing a wooden flute. The notes were simple, yet they carried the same magic that Zephyr had learned to appreciate. Each note telling a story without words, each breath of the flute carrying a piece of the man's heart. Zephyr hovered close, listening to the melody. It was a soft tune, and yet it filled the entire meadow, wrapping around the travelers and the night itself. Zephyr felt a deep longing, a reminder of the music he had once made. His chest stirred and he realized his whistle hadn't truly disappeared. It had just been waiting for the right moment to return. With a soft breath, Zephyr blew gently across the meadow. The wind that followed was light and soft, carrying with it a melody, a note that started as a soft hum, then slowly began to build. The tune that had been lost, that had been waiting, returned. This time his whistle was different. It wasn't the same sharp, playful sound that he had once known. It was richer, fuller, layered with the sounds he had collected along the way. The bird song from the meadow, the lullaby from the village, the hum of the flower, the flute melody from the traveler. It was all there, woven together into a single harmonious song. The travelers stopped talking and turned to listen, their faces filled with wonder. The man with the flute smiled and lowered his instrument, listening to Zephyr's whistle as it filled the air. For a moment, Zephyr hovered silently in the night, letting his new whistle echo across the meadow. The world seemed to pause, the fire flickering softly, the leaves rustling in time with the tune. Zephyr realized then that the world had not needed him to whistle. The world had already been singing. But now, with all the sounds he had collected, his whistle had become part of the song. It wasn't just his melody anymore. It was the world's music, too. As the song faded into the night, Zephyr felt something deep inside him, a quiet peace. His whistle had returned, but it was no longer just his own. It belonged to everything he had listened to, everything he had learned to appreciate. And that, he realized, was the most beautiful music of all. With a soft swirl, Zephyr drifted up into the night sky, the sound of his new whistle carrying on the wind, a gentle reminder that sometimes the most beautiful songs are the ones we learn to hear. Chapter 7: The Whistle of Stories. As the seasons turned, Zephyr's whistle became known far and wide. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a song filled with the laughter of children, the hum of old trees, the whisper of snowflakes, and the soft lullaby of mothers tucking their children into bed. Zephyr would pass through forests, valleys, and hills, and everywhere he went, his music filled the air. He didn't need to whistle loudly or in a hurry anymore. His music had depth now, full of everything he had learned to listen to. It was a melody woven with the stories of the world. And in every place, Zephyr found someone or something to share his song with. In the far north, Zephyr passed a village where the winds were always cold and harsh. People lived quietly, wrapped in thick coats and scarves, their faces hidden from the chill. Zephyr floated through the streets one evening, his new soft whistle drifting on the breeze. He could see the villagers' shoulders tense against the cold, their faces pulled tight against the wind. But when they heard his whistle, a soft, gentle tune that carried the warmth of distant summers, their faces softened. The wind itself seemed to change, no longer sharp and biting, but carrying a sense of calm and peace. Zephyr continued on his way, knowing that his song had touched their hearts. In a meadow far from the village, Zephyr met a young breeze, small and uncertain. She was spinning around in circles, too shy to let herself swirl with the other winds. Zephyr watched her for a while, his whistle soft and encouraging in the air. The young breeze looked up at him, her eyes full of questions. "I can't whistle like you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Zephyr smiled, the corners of his wind-swirled mouth curling upward. "You don't need to," he said gently. "Just listen. The world will show you how to sing." And so the young breeze listened. She listened to the rustling leaves, to the crackling of the fire in a distant camp, to the quiet hum of the mountains. Slowly she began to hum along, her sound soft but true. Zephyr stayed with her for a while, teaching her the secret he had learned, that sometimes the most beautiful music comes not from whistling or singing, but from simply being still and listening. In the evenings, when the sun dipped low and the world wrapped itself in quiet, Zephyr would float back to his favorite meadow, the place where he had first lost his whistle. The soft glow of twilight would fill the air, and he would listen to the sounds of the world, the rustle of the grass, the chirping of crickets, the distant bark of a dog. And now, when the wind would still for a moment, Zephyr would hear a hum, a soft, harmonious hum. That was his whistle, his song, his voice, joined by all the melodies he had gathered on his journey. Zephyr had learned over time that his whistle didn't need to be loud. It didn't need to be perfect. It didn't even need to be his own. It needed to be part of the world. Chapter 8. The Wind Who Listens. As the years passed, Zephyr became known not just for his music, but for his way of listening to the world. He had become the wind who carried stories and melodies from one corner of the earth to the other. His whistle, once lost, had become a part of the earth's song, a song that anyone could hear if they stopped to listen. One crisp autumn day, while floating gently over a sleepy village nestled in the valley, Zephyr felt a tug at his heart. He was drifting across a familiar field when he saw a tiny breeze, much like the one he had met so long ago, twisting and turning in confusion. She couldn't seem to find her rhythm, her path lost in the wind. Zephyr circled around her, his whistle soft and gentle in the air. The little breeze paused, her curls of air swirling around her uncertainly. "I don't know how to make music like the others," she said, her voice barely a flutter in the wind. Zephyr slowed, his own whistle quieting as he hovered beside her. "You don't need to make music like anyone else," he said. "Your music is already inside you. It just needs to be heard." The breeze looked down at the ground, her quiet winds brushing against the grass beneath her. "I don't know if I can do it. I can't find my tune." Zephyr smiled, remembering his own journey, how he had once struggled to find his whistle, only to realize it wasn't about the sound he could make, but the silence he had learned to listen to. He turned his focus to the meadow below, where the trees swayed gently and the birds chirped in sweet harmony. "Listen," he said softly. "Can you hear the leaves rustling, the birds calling, the wind through the grass?" The breeze closed her eyes for a moment, her tiny spirals stilling as she focused. And in that silence, she heard the world, the soft hum of the earth, the crackling of leaves, the subtle rhythm of a world spinning to its own song. "I hear it," the breeze whispered, her voice full of wonder. "It's beautiful." Zephyr nodded. "You don't need to whistle like others. The music is all around you. Just listen to it. Let it guide you." The breeze's confidence began to grow. She swirled gently through the air, following the melody of the world. As she moved, she began to hum, a soft, gentle sound that blended perfectly with the wind. It wasn't a loud sound, but it was a pure one. The world responded to her with a soft rustling in the trees and a gentle sway of the grass. Zephyr watched with pride as the little breeze discovered her own voice. It wasn't the same as his music, nor was it meant to be. It was hers, uniquely hers, and it was perfect. From that day on, Zephyr continued to travel, carrying his music and stories wherever he went. But he no longer rushed to fill the silence with his whistle. He knew now that silence, too, had its own beauty. And sometimes the best way to make music was to stop and listen. He would often return to the meadow where he had once learned to hear the world's hum. He would sit quietly on a cloud, letting the winds blow around him, remembering the lessons he had learned. And when the time was right, he would whistle again. But now, it was always in harmony with the world around him. Chapter 9. The Song of the World. As the years passed, Zephyr's melody spread across the land. He had long since stopped being the wind who needed to make noise, and had become the wind who carried stories, music, and silence alike. His whistle, once lost, had become a part of the world's song, a song that was ever-changing, ever-evolving, and always full of wonder. One afternoon, while drifting through the wide open fields of the west, Zephyr met another wind. This one was large and wild, full of energy and excitement. It swept across the land, stirring dust and leaves into the air, sending the trees swaying with vigor. Zephyr floated in its path, watching the chaos it created. "Why do you blow so hard?" Zephyr called, his voice a soft breeze among the wild gusts. The wild wind slowed slightly, its gusts softer now. "I've always been this way," it said with a huff. "I rush through the world, pushing everything aside. The trees move, the rivers ripple, and the clouds dance in my wake. But when I stop, the world feels so still." Zephyr smiled, a gentle ripple of wind lifting his spirit. "It is true," he said softly. "The world does move when you blow. But there is also something beautiful in stillness." The wild wind sighed and looked at the distant horizon, where the sun was beginning to set. "I've never been still. I've always thought that I needed to make everything happen. Rush, push, create motion. But I've never stopped to listen to the world." Zephyr nodded. "That's where the magic lies," he said. "The world has its own song. We just need to be still enough to hear it." The wild wind was silent for a long time, watching the quiet beauty of the world as it turned. The golden light of the setting sun painted the fields in hues of lavender and rose, and the birds began to sing their evening songs. For the first time, the wild wind stopped and listened. At first, the silence felt strange, unsettling even. The wild wind was used to the constant rush of movement, to the powerful force of pushing through the air. But as it paused, a new kind of understanding began to bloom in its core. It heard the rustling of the leaves, the soft whispers of the grass, and the distant hum of the earth itself. It was a symphony unlike anything it had ever known. Slowly, the wild wind began to change. It no longer rushed through the world in a flurry of chaos. Instead, it learned to move more gently, to swirl and twist without force, to listen as it carried the songs of the world. It learned that sometimes it was not the noise we make, but the silence we embrace that creates the most beautiful music. Zephyr watched the transformation, his heart full of pride. He had not only found his whistle again, but he had also shared the true song of the world with another wind. A song that was not just about noise, but about the quiet moments that made life meaningful. And so, Zephyr continued his journey, carrying with him the lessons of the winds, the songs of the world, and the beauty of silence. Chapter 10. The Wind Who Never Forgot. As time passed, Zephyr's song became legend, whispered from one breeze to the next, carried from one village to another. He no longer rushed through the world in search of his whistle, but instead moved gently, weaving through the trees, across the oceans, and through the hearts of everyone he met. The music of the world, Zephyr had learned, was always there. It lived in the wind, in the rustling of the leaves, in the hum of distant thunderstorms, and in the stillness of the night. And it wasn't about being loud or making noise. It was about listening. It was about finding the quiet moments that made the world sing. One warm evening, Zephyr floated high above the earth, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the sky. Below him, the world was wrapped in the soft light of dusk, fields of lavender, forests of pine, rivers winding lazily through hills. The air was peaceful, and for the first time in a long while, Zephyr felt at home. His whistle had returned, but it was different now. It was softer, fuller, more connected to the world around him. It carried the songs of the birds, the laughter of children, the melodies of the rivers, and the quiet hum of the earth. And in the stillness between each note, he heard something else, a deep, gentle peace. Zephyr hovered in the cool evening air, looking down at the world he had come to know so well. The winds had changed. They weren't all the same anymore. Some were playful and fast, others were slow and thoughtful. Some were loud, while others whispered quietly. And yet, each wind had its own song. Each breeze had its own voice. The young winds who had once come to Zephyr for guidance were now carrying their own melodies, sharing the lessons he had taught them. How to listen, how to be still, how to find music in the world. Every time Zephyr passed them, he would hear new songs, songs that filled the air with beauty and truth. One evening, as Zephyr drifted over a familiar hill, he noticed a small breeze spinning gently through the grasses. It was the same breeze he had met years ago, the one who had once been unsure of her own voice. She was no longer lost. She had found her own rhythm, her own music. Her winds flowed with grace, and her whistle was clear and bright. Zephyr floated down beside her, a soft smile in the breeze. "You've learned well," he said. The breeze stopped and looked up at him. "I have," she replied. "I've learned that the world has its own song. I just needed to listen." Zephyr nodded. "And now, it's your turn to teach others." With that, Zephyr drifted back into the night sky, content. His whistle was not the loudest. It was not the brightest. But it was his, woven from the sounds of the world, from the laughter, the quiet moments, and the stillness between the notes. As he floated through the night, he realized that the greatest joy didn't come from making music. It came from listening to the songs all around him. And with each passing day, Zephyr understood that the world was always singing. All he had to do was stop, listen, and let the music fill him.